On April 25, 2025, Virginia Giuffre died. Before her story was known to the world, Virginia was simply a young woman trying to navigate circumstances no person should ever face. Her journey from those early years towards becoming one of the most determined voices for accountability is a testament to how one person's courage can disrupt systems that rely on silence. What makes her story especially compelling is that she did not step forward from a place of privilege or authority. She stepped forward from the margins, carrying experiences that many would have found too overwhelming to revisit, let alone exposed to the harsh light of international attention. Yet Virginia understood something essential. When wrongdoing is allowed to hide behind titles, it grows stronger. More people get hurt, and when she had her daughter, she knew that if she wanted to protect her, she would have to speak up. And so, even when the odds were stacked against her heavily, she chose the hard path. This resolve would eventually bring her face to face with the British monarchies in her circle, most notably Prince Andrew, whose public image had long shielded him from scrutiny. Virginia's persistence transformed the situation from whispers into worldwide conversation. Through her legal filings, her interviews, and her refusal to be intimidated, she forced long-ignored questions into the open. The world watched as she challenged one of the most entrenched power structures on the planet with unyielding determination. Her quest to hold Prince Andrew accountable became a moment of cultural reckoning, illustrating how even one individual, if steadfast enough, can challenge narratives that once seemed untouchable. Virginia, even in death, refused to be silent. She would email the co-writer of her book, the person who had helped her navigate through her traumatic life healthfully, in order to shed a light on the powerful men who had taken advantage of her and countless young lives, and told her that no matter what happened to her, she wanted her story out there, regardless of if she was around to see it. In the moments before her death, she had gone through even more struggles, and it's only become clear in hindsight that she was planning on ending her life. But she was still determined for people to hear her story, for the powerful men who had not only abused her but other women as well to be held accountable, and to make the world a safer place. Her book, Nobody's Girl, would be published on October 21st, and it's absolutely one of the most harrowing reads, and her words even after death would make an impact. Though Virginia is not here today, her life deserves to be remembered, and she deserves to get justice, and we're only just beginning to see that in this case. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we are going to be revisiting the case of Prince Andrew, now just known as Andrew Albert Christian Edward Mountbatten Windsor, as well as the multiple updates there have been since we released our video nearly 2 years ago. If that number confuses you, because you can only see one video of Prince Andrew on our channel from 9 months ago, that's because the original video was reported by multiple parties and falsely copyright claimed, making it unable to be watched by anyone in the US and Canada. Because the video itself is restricted, it also doesn't appear in search results, and sadly we've had the same issue with our re-upload, even though it does not include visuals. We've gotten multiple notifications that the video has been reported multiple times, and though it remains visible at time of recording, we have a feeling that will eventually change. That said, both videos were able to garner an audience, meaning that at the very least, we were able to do our job. Today we're going to be returning to the case and going over some of the more recent updates. While it's doubtful that justice will ever truly be done here, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has faced a number of public embarrassments that illustrate that his actions are no longer being tolerated by the general public, and cannot be pushed under the rug by his powerful family. But as always, if there is a case you would like to see us cover or a story you would like to bring more attention to, you can let me know by emailing me at dreading.official@gmail.com. We're consistently going through our email and adding your suggestions to our list, and beginning our research process. But be aware, we are just 2 people, so it may take us some time to come around to your submission. But with all of that said, let us begin. Andrew Albert Christian Edward Mountbatten Windsor was born February 19, 1960 at Buckingham Palace, the 3rd child overall, and the 2nd son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. At the time of his birth, he was the 2nd in line to the throne, behind his older brother Charles. But as the spare in the royal family, Andrew enjoyed all the privileges that come with being royal, with less of the overall pressure. Andrew would pursue a military career. In 1979, he would join the Royal Navy on a short service commission as a seaman officer. Similarly, he passed courses at the Britannia Royal Naval Academy before moving into aviation, training on both fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters, and earned his pilot's wings in 1980. That same year, he received a Green Beret and won an award for being the best pilot. The royal family and their publicists made it clear that they wanted Andrew to be viewed by the general public as a serious military officer, with multiple press junkets and photo shoots involving Andrew engaging with other officers. However, the tabloids would often write about his sexual exploits as a bachelor. He was constantly seen going out, engaging with women at parties and bars, and he was given the mocking title of Randy Andy. In 1985, Andrew would begin seeing Sarah Ferguson, a childhood acquaintance. Their relationship moved quickly as they got engaged and were married in less than a year. That same day, he would become the Duke of York, a traditional title for the monarch's second son. But their relationship was ultimately short-lived. After 7 years together, they separated, and in 1996, they officially divorced, though they maintained an unusually close relationship afterwards. By the late 1990s, Andrew was transitioning out of active naval service. He left the Royal Navy in 2001 after roughly 22 years, having reached the rank of commander. From there, he moved into what might be called the corporate diplomatic phase of his life. That same year, he was appointed the United Kingdom's Special Representative of International Trade and Investment, an unpaid but high-profile role in which he traveled the globe promoting British business interests and attending trade events. During this period, Andrew's social and professional circles expanded well beyond the usual diplomatic crowd. As a trade figure and senior royal, he met business leaders, political figures, and financiers from around the world. These were extremely wealthy and powerful people, and Andy would feel as if he fit in with such a cosmopolitan crowd. Reports would later point to his interactions with figures linked to authoritarian regimes and questionable financial practices. But the public didn't know that. For much of the 2000s, these concerns were background noise, often hand-waved by the general public. Officially, he remained a working royal, a trade envoy, a father to 2 growing princesses, and a familiar face at public events. A good man working to make the world a better place, the way all royals are said to. It was in this context that he became connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Andrew has said that they first met around 1999, introduced by their mutual acquaintance, Ghislaine Maxwell, whom he had known since her university days. Epstein was known publicly as a wealthy financier, with homes in several countries and a knack for moving among the powerful. According to reports, Epstein had a talent for engaging with the upper class. He was extremely enterprising, to the point of being able to get some of the world's wealthiest and most powerful people to tell him their most depraved desires. Throughout the early mid-2000s, Andrew and Epstein moved in overlapping circles. Epstein attended events linked to Andrew and his family, including going to Andrew's daughter, Princess Beatrice's 18th birthday celebrations, while Andrew stayed at Epstein's residences and was seen with him at various social occasions. Their association was not yet the subject of intense public debate, and was highly documented at this stage. It was notable, certainly, that a senior royal was spending time with a high-flying financier, but many publications would state that showed how effective Andrew was in his position. Being close with Epstein was seen as a positive for Andrew. That changed when Epstein faced serious criminal charges involving minors in the U.S. We have yet to fully delve into the Epstein case on this channel, as it is still developing, but we will do our best to properly summarize the relevant details as it pertains to Andrew himself. When Jeffrey Epstein's legal troubles began moving from rumor to reality in the mid-2000s, it was not heavily documented. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that Epstein began to use his powerful connections and money in order to make sure his crimes went under the radar. In 2005, a complaint was filed at the Palm Beach Police Department in Florida. A 14-year-old girl's parents told police that the financier had paid their daughter for a massage. The location where the complaint was filed is significant, as Florida has robust sunshine laws, which ensured that even if the case was dismissed, the details would be made fully public. This lone complaint sparked an investigation that exposed a pattern of severe wrongdoing involving minors. For law enforcement, the single report quickly expanded into a sprawling case with multiple individuals stepping forward, each describing situations that were both disturbing and methodically organized. The investigation uncovered evidence that pointed far beyond what they initially expected. More individuals involved, more locations where harm had allegedly occurred, and a level of organization that suggested that this complaint was part of a large-scale operation. Under normal circumstances, the findings likely would have led to a long list of felony charges, each carrying substantial prison time. But rather than proceeding through traditional prosecution, the case was quietly routed from local authorities to the federal level. Negotiations began behind closed doors between Epstein's legal team and federal prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida. The result was a non-prosecution agreement. Epstein would plead guilty to 2 state-level charges involving the solicitation of a minor, counts far less severe than the ones originally recommended. He would then register as an offender and then serve a term in a county facility. In exchange, the federal government agreed not to pursue additional charges. The most striking element was that the agreement was crafted in such a way that most of Epstein's victims were not informed about it at the time. They only learned about the deal after it had been finalized, meaning that their input on their own abuse had not been taken into consideration. To be completely plain, the evidence against Epstein was solid, and this agreement wasn't necessary. The state could have easily presented the case against him and won, but for some reason, they opted to ignore what any of his victims would have wanted, and settled the matter behind closed doors. Though sentenced to 18 months, he only served 13. During that period, he was granted work release, which allowed him to leave the facility for up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, reportedly spending much of that time in an office environment rather than a cell. Despite his crimes, his life remained mostly unaffected, and so did many of his friendships. Epstein would be released from prison in 2008, and his friendship with the prince would resume seemingly unaffected. In 2010, Andrew was photographed walking with Epstein in New York's Central Park. For the first time, Andrew would receive public backlash for the association. The photos were taken of the pair on a walk, and it was also reported that Andrew had stayed at the pedophile's home in New York for the entirety of his trip, and had previously made repeated visits to Epstein's Floridian mansion where the crimes had taken place. But Andrew and the royal family attempted to assuage any of the public's concerns, repeatedly stating that Andrew was not friends with the convicted pedophile. Rather, they were just loose associates who worked together for a short while. They weren't friends, they were barely even colleagues, and Andrew would not be seen talking to Epstein in the future. Emphasis on being seen. But following the public statements, a photo would come out of Prince Andrew with his arm around a young girl with Maxwell in the background. That girl was Virginia Giuffre, and she would allege that he had had sex with her 3 separate times, while she had been trafficked and exploited by Epstein. Over the years, Andrew has denied this photo is legitimate multiple times, giving different excuses every few years. At one point, he had stated that he knew the photo was fraudulent because, quote, "When I go out in London, I wear a suit and tie," unquote. He would then add that he had never seen Epstein with a camera in his life, in the hopes that his word could be used as bond. Andrew's own supporters would state that it was obvious the photo was doctored, as Andrew's fingers were well known to be chubbier than those in the photograph. In October of 2025, multiple of Epstein's emails would be released. In one email, Jeffrey wrote the following: "This girl fled the country with an outstanding arrest warrant. The DA, after she accused others, said in writing that she had no credibility. She was never 15 years old, working for me, and her story made it seem like she first worked for Trump at that age and was met by Ghislaine Maxwell. Total horseshit. The Daily Mail paid her money and they admitted it, with the statement that it took money to coax out the truth. Yes, she was on my plane, and yes, she had her picture taken with Andrew, as many of my employees have. I have never misled you. This girl is a total liar. The authorities should check her Australian immigration form. You could talk to Dershowitz. I'll ask if they will cooperate, Prince people." This email does a few things that are important to note. First, Epstein spends a considerable amount of time and energy trying to discredit Virginia. Her life was extremely hard, filled with trauma and abuse, and trying to find equilibrium after that is extremely difficult. Epstein knows that, which is why she was targeted. By focusing his efforts on young women who came from traumatic home lives, he could use their fragile mental states against them and make them appear untrustworthy. He attempts to assassinate her credibility in the hopes that he can ensure none of her statements are looked into carefully. It's also important to note that he doesn't provide any actual rebuttal against what she had said, or showcase her lying in any meaningful way. Instead, he points to other things she has done to show that she can't be trusted. If she were lying about her story, and he had proof of that, he would have dismantled it point by point. But directly after he tries to destroy her testimony, he admits that she did work for him. She was on his plane, and the photo that is being used as direct evidence is real, meaning that significant parts of her story are based in fact. He quickly pushes past this point though, as if it doesn't matter, but it does. The release of these emails would also show 4 months of correspondence between Andrew and Jeffrey, including this email that was sent from the prince after the photo of him and Virginia was published. Quote, "I'm just as concerned for you. Don't worry about me. It would seem we are in this together, and we will have to rise above it. Otherwise, keep in close touch and we'll play some more soon." Unquote. But as far as the public is aware, their strictly professional relationship, as Andrew would call it, was over. Shortly thereafter, it emerged that Epstein had helped pay off $19,000 worth of Sarah Ferguson's debts, with Andrew's involvement. This showed the public just how close the pair had been to the predator, as they felt comfortable asking for such a large sum of money, and he felt similarly about giving it to them. In response, Sarah Ferguson would make a public statement of apology, saying that she made a, quote, "gigantic error of judgment," unquote, by associating with Epstein, but went further to state that her ex-husband was a, quote, "first-rate man who does not know how to tell an untruth or behave dishonorably," unquote. which is a wild statement in hindsight. The statement would go further. I personally, on behalf of myself, deeply regret that Jeffrey Epstein became involved in any way with me. I abhor pedophilia and any sexual abuse of children, and know that this was a gigantic error of judgment on my behalf. I am just so contrite I cannot say. Whenever I can, I will repay the money, and I will have nothing ever to do with Jeffrey Epstein ever again. According to the Daily Mail, shortly after making that public statement, Sarah would email Epstein an apology. Apparently, he had seen her statement and felt personally betrayed, and had reportedly made threats to sue her for defamation. In her response, she wrote, quote, "I know you feel hellaciously let down by me, and I must humbly apologize to you and your heart for that. I was instructed to act with the utmost speed if I would have any chance of holding on to my career as a children's book author and children's philanthropist. As you know, I did not, absolutely not, say the P word about you, but understand it was reported that I did. I am apologizing to you today for not replying to your email or reaching out to you. I was bedridden with fear, I was paralyzed." That would only come to light in September of 2025. As of October of 2025, there is newly publicized evidence to indicate that Epstein had lent her between $50,000 to $100,000 over a 15-year period. Some experts state that the number is actually much higher, but at the time of recording, there is no exact number. Following some of the public backlash, Andrew's role was terminated. He was still a prince and held a considerable amount of influence. But it seemed that the royal family hoped that by lessening his public appearances, people would move on from the controversy. But that did not occur. In 2014, Andrew's name was listed amongst other prominent figures as having sexually exploited and assaulted a minor, that being Virginia Roberts. She would state that she had been sexually trafficked by Epstein, which is how she came into contact with Andrew. He had sexually abused her on 3 separate occasions. Flight logs would show that the pair had been in the same locations at the same time that she stated these assaults took place, and the photo of the pair would be used as evidence. Despite his denials, a butler who worked at Epstein's mansion would later testify that Andrew had visited the pedophilic sex trafficker more often than had previously been reported. He went on the record to state that Andrew spent weeks at the manor and received, quote, daily massages, unquote. In 2019, multiple things would occur, putting Andrew's name back in the headlines. Epstein would be arrested on July 6th on new sex trafficking charges. His previous arrest had been reported on, but he'd been able to use his influence to lessen the fallout. But with the majority of the public now being on social media, the story was able to spread further than it had before. Epstein's ties to other powerful individuals gained widespread attention, as people noted that he was likely trafficking women and minors for other people's exploitation. However, on August 10th, a month after his arrest, he would be found dead in a cell. Investigators would state that he died by suicide. This sparked large-scale outrage, with most people feeling as if he escaped justice. Some felt that he'd been killed by one of his powerful friends in order to ensure that he didn't expose their corruption, while others felt that his death had been falsely reported on, and he simply escaped to live under a new identity. But given that the public could no longer center their outrage on his actions, they looked toward the people who had been implicated in his crimes, including Andrew. At the same time, emails between John Brockman and Evgeny Morozov would be published in the New Republic. In these emails, John would state that he saw a British man who everyone called Andy receive a foot massage from 2 Russian women during his well-publicized visit to Epstein's New York home in 2010. At the time, he had no idea who the man was, and only later learned that it was the prince. A second girl, Johanna Joberg, would allege that Andrew had touched her breast while at Epstein's mansion. Her statement was a part of Virginia's defamation case against Ghislaine, and only became public when the documents were unsealed. It had been 9 years since Andrew had publicly disassociated with Jeffrey, and things had not gotten any better. The royal family had denied and ignored the claims, hoping that if they stayed the course, and he was seen in public doing charity work, that the general opinion of him would change. But with the reignited interest into his actions, they decided that it was in their best interest to change their approach. Andrew would give an interview which went hysterically poorly for the prince. However, he was unaware of that fact, and the reporter who interviewed him would state that he seemed to feel like he did an amazing job. We reviewed the footage in our initial video, linked below. Despite being happy with his performance, Andrew would announce just 4 days later he would be stepping back from his public duties. In a statement he would write, quote, "It has become clear to me over the last few days that the circumstances relating to my former association with Jeffrey Epstein has become a major disruption to my family's work and the valuable work going on in the many organizations and charities that I am proud to support. Therefore, I have asked Her Majesty if I may step back from public duties for the foreseeable future, and she has given her permission." I continue to unequivocally regret my ill-judged association with Jeffrey Epstein. His suicide has left many unanswered questions, particularly for his victims, and I deeply sympathize with everyone who has been affected and wants some form of closure. I can only hope that, in time, they'll be able to rebuild their lives. Of course, I'm willing to help any appropriate law enforcement agency with their investigations, if required. In August of 2021, Giuffre would file a civil lawsuit against Andrew in the U.S., alleging that he had sexually assaulted her and the intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her team posited that not only had the prince assaulted her, but after she came forward, he paid multiple troll accounts to harass her and threaten her online. Andrew's legal team seemingly attempted to dodge service. When that was unsuccessful, they asked the judge to dismiss the lawsuit according to a sealed settlement reached between Epstein and Giuffre in 2009. They argued that the settlement absolved Epstein, Andrew, and numerous other people from any and all liability. They also argued that the case should be dismissed, as Virginia had been 17 at the time, and they felt that her account about consenting was, quote, highly suggestive, unquote. In simpler terms, Andrew would state that he had not sexually exploited Virginia, but if he had, her previous settlement with Epstein made any legal action against him void, and that she had been of age when it occurred. Therefore, he was not legally on the hook for the fact that she had been sex trafficked by his friend. In January of 2022, a judge denied Andrew's lawyer's motion to dismiss the case, and seemingly in response, Queen Elizabeth stripped Andrew of his military affiliations and royal patronages. The speed at which this decision was made is indicative that the decision was reliant on if the case was dismissed or not. Had it been dismissed outright, he might have been able to keep moving forward outside the public eye. The case would be settled out of court in February that same year, but with the release of Epstein's emails and Virginia's book, King Charles would remove all of Andrew's royal titles. In a seemingly face-saving statement, Andrew would state that he would no longer be using the titles, as if that were something that he believed was no longer appropriate. The statement read, quote, "In discussion with the king and my immediate and wider family, we have concluded that the continued accusations about me distract from the work of His Majesty and the royal family. I have decided, as I always have, to put my duty to my family and country first. I stand by my decision 5 years ago to stand back from public life. With His Majesty's agreement, we feel I must now go a step further. I will therefore no longer use my title or the honors which have been conferred upon me. As I have said previously, I vigorously deny the accusations against me." It ends there, but by the end of last month, the palace would announce that they had started the process of removing all of his titles and honors. Their statement read, quote, "Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. His lease on the Royal Lodge has, to date, provided him with legal protection to continue in residence. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease, and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him. Their Majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse." Unquote. On November 6, 2025, Andrew was asked by members of the U.S. Congress to answer questions as part of its investigation into Epstein. Based on his repeated statements, including the one he gave just last month, you would expect that he would have immediately agreed, but according to one of the congressmen involved in the Oversight Committee, he's been dodging the request. Suhas Subramaniam would state that Andrew, quote, "has been hiding from us, and I think he will continue to try and hide from people doing meaningful investigations of this matter. It seems like every time we find more evidence, Prince Andrew seems to be in the documents, and so I think if he is hoping that the story will just go away by ignoring us and being silent, he will be sorely disappointed as we continue to pursue this over the next year and beyond. There was a point in time where Andrew had influence, where he was given the lay of the land simply because he was born into a powerful family, and he used that influence to hurt people. He associated with a sex trafficker and pedophile. He sexually exploited Virginia, and he has spent the past decades running from any sort of responsibility. Even now, he sits alone, without a title and the backing of his family, and still cannot take ownership of his actions and address what he has done. So instead, he continues to lie and evade like a cockroach. But at the very least, it seems unlikely that he'll be able to hurt anyone in the future. Virginia spent her life trying to make sure that justice was served, that the powerful men that hurt her would not be able to inflict themselves on anyone else. And in this case, we believe that she was successful. If there are any further updates, we will inform you in a later video. But if you have made it to this point in the video, thank you for watching. These cases tend to take a lot of our mental energy to get through, and we're certain that it is no easier to sit through. But if there's a video you would like to see us produce or a story you want to bring more attention to, just let me know by emailing me at dreading.official@gmail.com. Have a great day, and remember, stay safe.